A new poll has presented an unfortunate beginning for Keir Starmer, as it reveals that voters now hold a more favorable opinion of Reform UK than they do of the Labour Party. Conducted by JL Partners between October 11th and 13th, the poll showed that 28% of respondents had a very or somewhat positive view of Nigel Farage's Reform UK, while 27% felt similarly about Labour. In comparison, the Conservatives fared even worse, with only 23% of voters expressing a positive opinion about the former ruling party. Starmer's Labour Party seems to be facing greater negativity as well, with 47% of voters holding a very or somewhat negative view of Labour, whereas only 41% felt similarly about Reform UK. Furthermore, Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, enjoys a stronger approval rating than the Prime Minister, boasting a 27% favorable rating compared to Starmer's 24%. Voters are more disapproving of Starmer than Farage, with half of the electorate, 50%, having a negative perception of the Prime Minister, while only 27% shared the same sentiment towards Farage. Farage enjoys significant support from his party's voters, with 85% of Reform UK supporters having a positive view of him, while a mere 1% hold a negative opinion. However, Farage's popularity does not extend far beyond his core supporters, with less than 30% of voters from other political groups viewing him favorably. On the other hand, Labour voters show relatively less enthusiasm for Starmer, with only 52% expressing a positive view of their leader. The strongest opposition to Starmer comes from Reform UK supporters, 82% of whom have a negative opinion of him, a higher proportion than in any other political group. Despite these figures, the Labour Party still leads in the overall polling, with 29% of voter support, ahead of the Conservatives at 25% and Reform UK at 19%. Labour has also seen a decline in its popularity among older voters, particularly those over the age of 65, a demographic that previously accounted for more than a quarter of their voter base. The drop in support from this age group is attributed to Labour's controversial winter fuel allowance policy. Labour's initial tenure in government has been marked by several controversies and unpopular policies, which have contributed to the party's turbulent start. A separate poll conducted by YouGov and released on Friday found that half of Labour's voters are already disappointed with Starmer's government. Additionally, 40% of the British public believe the country is in a worse state now than it was before the election. In a different issue, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has received a letter from Republic, an anti-monarchy organization, urging her to reduce the royal family's budget instead of cutting public services in the upcoming budget. The letter outlines Republic's concerns over cuts to public services and welfare, while the costs associated with the monarchy are expected to rise. Republic also asserts that MPs lack a proper understanding of royal funding. Graham Smith, the CEO of Republic, criticized MPs for being poorly informed about the costs of the monarchy, making it difficult to have a serious discussion about reducing royal expenses. According to Republic, the monarchy costs the UK more than £500 million annually, a figure they argue is unjustifiable, especially when the government is contemplating cuts to essential public services. The organization has called on the Chancellor to consider abolishing the sovereign grant, which provides the royal family with funding for their official duties. Republic also pointed out that members of the royal family carried out 2,700 engagements, both in the UK and overseas last year. Although the Crown Estate generates significant revenue, Republic argues that it does not cover the monarchy's costs, as the sovereign grant is funded by a percentage of the estate's profits, initially set at 15% and reviewed by the government every 5 years. Smith questioned how the government can justify allocating £500 million to the monarchy when cuts to vital public services are on the table. He suggested that, if difficult decisions are necessary, cuts should begin at the top. Smith also called for the establishment of a fixed annual salary for members of the royal family. Republic's letter, addressed to Downing Street and signed by CEO Graham Smith, was posted on the organization's X account at 8 a.m. In the letter, Smith also urged the government to launch an inquiry into the Duchy of Lancaster, a private estate owned by King Charles, and the Duchy of Cornwall, a private estate that generates income for the Prince of Wales. Prince William, the current Duke of Cornwall, voluntarily pays income tax on the £21 million annual revenue earned from the estate. Rachel Reeves is set to deliver Labour's first budget in 14 years on October 30th. Another pressing issue in the country involves the contentious use of hotels to house asylum seekers arriving via small boats. Labour, during their election campaign, had promised to end the Conservative government's policy of housing migrants in hotels, a policy that costs the country up to £8 million a day. However, it has recently come to light that the new government is in talks with hotel chains to secure additional accommodation for asylum seekers, indicating that Labour, like their Conservative predecessors, is struggling to find quick solutions to the small boats crisis. The number of migrants arriving in the UK by crossing the English Channel has surged in recent months, surpassing the figures recorded during the Conservatives' final 6 months in power. Yvette Cooper, the new Home Secretary, has pinned her hopes on speeding up the asylum processing system to reduce the backlog and decrease reliance on hotels for migrant accommodation. However, human rights groups and lawyers, who were once dismissed as lefty lawyers by the previous government, have become adept at ensuring that most asylum seekers eventually gain permission to remain in the UK, even if it requires lengthy legal processes. Another key aspect of Labour's strategy to address the small boats issue is to crack down on people smuggling gangs, with the government aiming to ramp up law enforcement efforts both domestically and internationally to target these criminal networks. However, breaking up such organized crime groups will not be easy or swift, leaving Labour, like the Conservatives before them, grappling with how to manage the ongoing influx of small boat migrants. Under the previous Conservative government, some progress was made in reducing the reliance on hotels for housing asylum seekers, with the number of hotel beds used dropping from a high of 56,000 in 2023. The Conservatives were able to free up 20,000 beds and return around 150 hotels to community use. However, Labour is learning that bold campaign promises to end the use of hotels and close migrant accommodation centers at former RAF bases and on the Bibi Stockholm barge are proving difficult to fulfill. The controversial plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, a policy championed by the Conservative government as a deterrent against illegal channel crossings, was scrapped by Starmer on his first day in office. The Conservatives had hoped the Rwanda plan would have a significant impact in discouraging migrants from attempting the dangerous crossing, but its effectiveness will never be known due to its cancellation.